I'd like to invite our panelists up. We're going to start with Sarah Bromberg. Come on up, Sarah. Sarah's a music supervisor with the Bonfire Collective. Didn't like that feedback. That's right. We also have the lovely Erica Falls, who's an amazing artist and singer and songwriter here. Notice I did ladies first. We also have with us tonight Dino Gankendorf from Provosti and Gankendorf, who's one of the top entertainment attorneys in town. And we had asked Kyle Lamy from NCIS to come out, but as you can imagine, they're filming 21 hours today, and he wasn't able to make it. So a couple of weeks ago, he gave me the heads up that he wasn't able to make it, and I happened to be having coffee with my good friend Michael Murphy of Michael Murphy Productions, who is a filmmaker and video guy, and we were having coffee, and he started talking about all these licensing issues and stuff. I'm like, are you available on September 18th? Because you'd be a great addition to the panel. So please welcome Michael Murphy. And a little bit later, we'll have a special guest, Mr. John Boutte will be coming up after the panel, and he'll give you a little insight into his world. But I want to kind of start there because, you know, as a professional in this industry for a long time, New Orleans has always been a live music town. We've always been focused on those live gigs. And really, when I've talked to my colleagues around the country about the music industry, the real money in the industry is in the music publishing and sync licensing and things like that. And so when Treme came to town, when HBO came to town several years ago, I think it was the first time that many New Orleans artists had their first taste of sync licensing. And ever since then, which is what, like 10 years ago now, every year I know I've been a part of some kind of music sync panel. As Don alluded to, the very first Sync Up panel was on this same topic. And this just goes to show that this is an evergreen topic. It's just always important. So I want to start with Sarah, put her on the spot a little bit. Can you give us just a general overview of what music supervision is?
Yeah, so music supervision is the involvement of a director of music in film and television and advertising. So when you're working on a project, you're generally involved in every single aspect of music in that project. So that may be licensing music, source music, meaning pre-existing music that you put against a picture, creatively pitching music and artists to be included in that project, and then also going through and negotiating the fees for those songs and creating licenses for them. It also can be involved creating original music or bringing in artists to appear on camera and perform in that television show, commercial, or film. And it can also involve working with the original score, and it also can involve basically any way that music can touch that production, you will have a hand in some way in dealing with it.
Awesome. And to follow up a little bit on that, can you talk a little bit about your experience as a music supervisor and maybe the difference between like a TV show versus a movie versus advertising?
I mean, there's really not a huge difference between them. I mean, at the end of the day, it all involves a creative need, a creative ask, and how do we fulfill that creative ask with music? And how do we do it in a way that we can afford, in a way that really sells the picture, in a way that really makes it creatively sing? So there are minor differences. The money is very different across all three. I would say that's probably the biggest difference. TV earning the smallest amount of money, film earning the larger amount of money, and advertising earning heads and tails above both of those. And the reason for that, people often ask why advertising commands such higher fees, and it's because it's perceived that you are using the music or the artist to sell your product, and so you will be making money off of that, and so the fees are significantly higher than they are for film and television. And then also for film and television, the fees vary based on the budget and how you're releasing it. So for film, it can be actually quite small, but they also can be quite large, obviously, depending on if you're at a blockbuster or a very indie film.
Cool. I want to dig into that a little more later.
Yeah.
I want to jump over to Dino and talk a little bit about as an attorney representing your clients, what are some of the, well, one, can you maybe give us a description of what the kind of licenses are that are involved in having music placed in a TV show or et cetera?
Yeah, so typically there's 2 licenses, the master use license, which is a license for the use of the master recording, so I think of it as the tape, when there was tape. The other side is the sync license, which is the use of the words and music. That's kind of known as the publishing side of it. So those are the 2 licenses that are usually in play, unless it's, you know, scoring deal or something, composer agreement, something like that.
Cool. Erica, as an artist, you were just sharing with me just a few minutes ago that you actually shot an episode of NCIS yesterday, right?
Yes.
How important as a performing artist as it is to really start to explore, you know, from your perspective, the additional income streams that something like sync licensing might provide?
It's very important to have that extra revenue, that extra stream of revenue coming in, because sometimes gigs can be plentiful or, you know, they can become, you know, very scarce. So it's good to have that influx of income coming in from doing, performing on a song, on a track, or in a movie, or something on television. It's very important.
Can you give us a little insight into how since it's so fresh in your mind, into how the NCIS thing came about yesterday and what that negotiation looked like to get to that point?
Well, I got a call from Kyle, and he wanted me to be a part of the scene that for NCIS. And it started with, well, send me 6 songs. You can send originals, you can send cover tunes according to the scene, which we did, but they ended up choosing an Aretha Franklin tune for us to do. But if, you know, my songs would have, they had to pay the royalties, of course, but if one of my songs would have been chosen, that meant, you know, that would have come to me, which would have been great, but, you know, that's not what the idea was for the scene. Yeah.
Cool. And I don't want to leave out Michael. You probably have a whole hour's worth of stories we could talk about, I'm sure. But as someone who has probably licensed more Louisiana music than anybody on the planet in the long run, can you give us a little insight into, as a documentary maker and or the many years you filmed at Jazz Fest, what are some of the challenges from the filmmaker side that you've encountered, even starting this process of talking to artists about the importance of making sure they do the paperwork properly?
Yeah, I come at it from a little different angle. So back when I was filming Jazz Fest, and that went on for 25, 26 years, in those cases, I'm either creating a program or a television show or DVD or, you know, doing a webcast. And in those situations, I'm basically recording the performances. The bands are choosing the music they want to perform. And if it's going out live, it's going out live. If it's a post-produced show, then normally I have to work pretty closely with the band to find out, you know, what particular songs they want me to feature. And in some cases, there's some songs that I prefer or I like, and so it's normally a pretty quick process. I've been doing it a long time, and a lot of the bands here in New Orleans, they know me. When I'm doing a documentary film, that's actually different, because there I'm sort of selecting the music that I want. And I'm trying to tell a story, and music is very important to that. So it's really the flip side of the live performance stuff. And then once I have a list of songs that, okay, these are the ones I'm going to use, then I have people that I've worked with that contact the record companies, contract the publishers. You know, I guess over the last 20 years, 25 years, you know, I probably have spent $1 million, $1.5 million on music rights, publishing rights. And it's a process. It takes a while. It's not fast. So if any of you guys are ever working with a film producer or whatever, the publishing side can normally, I found, take 3 to 6 months, sometimes longer. I was one of the founding members of House of Blues, and I created the House of Blues and produced the House of Blues television series. In that particular case, it was really difficult because it was a weekly show. It ran for 26 weeks, and a lot of the publishing clearances weren't even coming in until after the series was finished. But luckily, I had good attorneys, and they said, "Don't worry about it."
So I want to touch on a topic that is central to everything that you've all mentioned so far, and you've all kind of alluded to it a little bit, and Bill certainly alluded to it in the opening, and it's about building relationships and building the trust. And over the many music supervisor panels that I've been to, attended, moderated, the supervisors I know, it almost always seems to come down to relationships. So I'd actually like to kind of get a little bit from each of y'all on, from your perspective, building that relationship and that trust with a music supervisor or with an artist or with an attorney. What does that look like? And if y'all could each maybe take a stab at kind of giving it to me from your perspective of how important building that trust factor is. Yeah, start with Michael and come back this way.
I mean, from my end, the relationships are they're extremely important. Not only the relationships with the film distributor or the funder, the publishers, the attorneys. I mean, somebody like Dino, I imagine his job basically is to sort out the ones that he doesn't feel are really ones that he wants to get his artist involved with. So there's a filtering process. But once you have a network of people that you can turn to, whether it's an attorney, whoever, I mean, a good example of this is that I'm just finishing up a film that I've been working on for 5 years. And it's basically about New Orleans music. And I have, 50 to 60 songs in that film. And quite frankly, I couldn't afford the publishing. I didn't have enough money. So I made personal phone calls to different labels. And because of a long time association, most of the labels and the publishers would said, you've been at it for decades, so yeah, we're going to work with you on this. That's a good indication of how networking and those connections can help.
Yeah, I was going to say, from my perspective, yeah, those relationships are key because in just kind of in my world, I often deal with a music supervisor who's like, look, we're in a jam, we need this cleared, but to some degree, they're looking at me to say, okay, especially New Orleans, I mean, we have unfortunately this history of publishing messes where, you got 2 dead guys, an ex-wife, a stripper, and a whoever that are all claimants on the publishing, which I will tell you is not a good idea to have, right? But to some degree, they don't have the time to go start chasing these folks down. And if you have that mess out there, it's really hard to clear that kind of stuff. So, the trust in the relationship, I mean, if I tell someone, hey, I can clear it. I mean, I'll give them my word, knowing that I know probably the 3 co-writers involved, and I've communicated with them that they're okay on the price, because, their job is to some degree at stake on this, right? I mean, we can't put this in a movie and let it show, and then after the fact have some claimant coming forward saying, well, wait, I was a co-writer. I mean, that's just a total nightmare. So, I mean, these relationships are definitely very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, that literally has been a central theme to so many music supervisor panels that I've heard over the years, is that their job is on the line, and being able to prove and or earn the trust that what you're giving that music supervisor to put in the film is cleared and doesn't have the potential to bite them in the butt with a lawsuit on the back end. But from that perspective, Erica, when you're working with an artist or other songwriters, often, like I have a bunch of friends on Music Row in Nashville, and they talk about how there's these understood agreements going into the songwriting room. Maybe can you share some of your perspective on, what this song might do that you're working on now? Do y'all talk about it? Is there understood agreements? Do y'all sign work for hires? Do you sign any kind of split sheets? Maybe give us a little insight on any of those things from a musician perspective.
Well, for me as an artist, knowing people like this is very vital because they have the access or the key to open the door. And normally when I'm doing a co-write with everyone, I tell everyone, bring your publishing information. We're going to split this evenly so it's no confusion. And we do that before we start writing, because then everyone's comfortable in the writing session, and then creativity can take place at that point. So we make sure we lay everything out on the table before we even start.
That's a very good point for you songwriters out there. CYA. That's the best. Sarah, you probably got the best stories with this.
I mean, I'm just nodding, actively nodding at everything that y'all are saying, because this is all very, very true and correct. And as far as once you get that relationship with a music supervisor, with a Kyle Amy, someone who brings New Orleans music on, you need to have your ducks in a row. So yes, absolutely have your paperwork signed, know who has the rights to everything, don't have uncleared samples, et cetera, et cetera. But as far as developing that relationship and creating it, I mean, I'm honestly a fan of research, and I'm not against cold emailing. That wasn't me. That's not me making that noise. I didn't want to say that. I'm not against cold emailing. You can research what films are filming here very easily. You can research what films, you can find out what those films are about. If the films are set in New Orleans, or if the shows are set in New Orleans, they're gonna need New Orleans music in some way, whether it's like an on-camera or something that they're gonna do in post where they put a bunch of music in. There's always a need in films that are set here, because this is such a music town, to have a New Orleans sound, and there is a ton of stuff that shoots here. Not all of it is set here, but a lot of it ends up being set here. So finding that information out, looking on IMDb, maybe getting an IMDb Pro account, seeing who the music supervisor is, and honestly, you can find music supervisors' emails pretty easily. You just Google it. It does, you have to do some searching. It requires the legwork. But if you can send an email that catches their eye, and trust me, we get a lot of emails. It's not like we don't get a lot of pitch emails, but if you can send an email that clearly states the type of music that you have, why it's going to work, in the subject line, it's like an elevator pitch. Like, succinctly put what you have, that you have an easy, clear, one stop, the master, the publishing, affordable stuff that's New Orleans sound, it's blues, or it's Cajun, or it's jazz, or it's whatever you have, to hook them and, say, oh, I actually do need that. I can tell you, like, I will respond to that. If I'm like in my inbox, it's like, oh, I'm talking to my colleague, oh, we really need this. And it's like, oh, an email popped up. It's like, I have this, and it's easy, clear, and it's affordable. And I'm like, yes, we need that. I will respond to that email. So that's a way to begin that relationship. And then to keep it, to develop it, you will need to be able to respond quickly, to send whatever that music supervisor needs quickly, have all your business ends sorted, don't have it be a mess, be able to contact any writers to clear stuff easily. And if you get that going, it will continue to go, because if we find a good source, we go back to it over and over again, because not everybody is a good source, and we learned that the hard way. So yes, I think all of that, plus reaching out and being like, this is what I have and this is why it's good, I think it works.
That's awesome. That's awesome information.
You said
Don't have it be a mess.
Be a mess.
Be a mess.
I was like, I don't know what be a mess.
It's one of those acronyms we don't know.
So you mentioned IMDb, but also I think you can actually go to louisianaentertainment.gov and you can search. They also post who's filming in Louisiana. So that's a way that you can at least start the search of who's actually doing work in the state, that you can then do your research to find out who the music supervisor is. So once you found that music supervisor person, I mean, I know from knowing several of them that there's no one way to approach somebody. I know music supervisors who say, don't call me, I'll call you, I'll find you. I know other music supervisors who say, send me everything you got, but there's a whole bunch of middle ground. So from your perspective, what do you prefer? I mean, you just said, do you want 10 songs? Do you want one song? Do you want one or two songs to open the door? Or do you want somebody to send you a whole catalog?
Yeah, No, send like 10 songs and in a downloadable format and your MP3s with all your metadata in it, your email and your phone number and who the writers are.
What's
and
metadata?
Metadata in an MP3, if you like right click on an MP3 in iTunes, it opens up a box and you can filter in all this information, who the writers are, any comments, you can put your email address there. If you import that MP3, like we, for instance, use a system called Disco, all of that information is uploaded. So I just have to hover over the little I next to your file and your contact information is gonna pop up and I'm like, oh, okay, I know who I need to email to get the rights to this once I upload it. So have all your file names, don't have it be file xyzpqrts.mp3, have it with the song title, plus your artist name and contact information and writer information in the metadata, super neatly organized, downloadable, easily downloadable, not a Spotify link, not a streaming, not a SoundCloud link, download link, 10 songs.
How many of you knew that you could right-click and put all that info in? A few of you. Do you want to say that? Say that one more time. I think that's really important.
With the metadata?
Yeah.
Oh.
Talk about that metadata piece. Write this down, y'all. This is important.
So if in iTunes, assuming most people have iTunes, if you right-click on a file, you can say more info, and when you click more info, a box will pop up, and in that box will be fields. It will say artist name, it will say song title, it will also say album name, and then there's a whole section called writers. There's a comment section where you can put anything in, and yeah, your ISRC you can put in. So you can fill in all that information, and then once you hit OK, that information lives with that MP3. So anybody that you send that MP3 to will get that same information. It's called the metadata.
So you're saying you actually prefer that the song be an attachment instead of a downloadable link? Or
No, not as attachment, as a downloadable link with MP3s. Yeah. No, because I can't use a Spotify against picture, so I could listen to it quickly and say, okay, that's great, but once I need it to send to an editor, that doesn't help me, and then I've got to send another email to get things back from you, so it's better to just have it all together.
Streamlining.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of Q&A. Should we? Where's Bill? All right. Let me do a couple of questions of them, and then we'll jump into a big Q&A. So y'all cool with hanging on for a few minutes? I wanted to follow up a little bit. Yeah, sorry. There's water for y'all. Sarah, one more question for you. When it comes to the quality, an MP3 is acceptable quality, or Michael, maybe you might be able to answer this as well, as far as what you need for production. And is it different for TV? Is it different for film?
Well, it's good initially, but I know for a final cut, you would need to get a WAV. But a WAV is a very large file to send just to test, but I'm sure for a filmmaker it's different because you're probably automatically putting it against pictures, so you don't need the small file initially.
I have to admit, when it comes to music and the audio component of what I'm doing, I rely on my audio engineers, because otherwise I'll screw it up. I mean, I've learned to surround myself with the right people, so the right attorney, the right audio engineers, the right DPs. So usually we get asked to put, different types of files together to send off for approval. And my partner, who's over here, Solicitor Eberle, she does that for me. But in general, the audio to me is so important, the music is so important, that I want my audio engineers to be very hands-on in that process. I have something I was thinking about when Sarah was talking. One thing that I think is a real strength of the musicians in this city is that just to survive, they can do all sorts of genres of music. Whether it's jazz, whether it's blues, whether it's funk, whether it's rock. And over the course of interviewing a lot of musicians here, they really don't like to be characterized. They don't want to say, I'm a jazz musician. They basically say, I'm a musician. And that's a real strength, because it could be that you send Sarah a link to a song that you did, but you're also able to do a different take on that same song. So, just last week, a couple of days ago, a friend of mine in Los Angeles sent me an email about a new pilot by ABC for a New Orleans-based show. It's going to be a soap opera, apparently, or in that genre. But it got the green light, and it's called House of the Rising Sun. And immediately I was thinking, wow, I mean, and the musicians they're talking to do the soundtrack, I believe, is out in Los Angeles, which is, that's the networking. I mean, that's what it takes. But I was also thinking, would it be possible, Reed, between you and Bill, whoever, would it be possible to have some sort of network so that when something like that's announced, musicians here have a chance to have their work sampled? Because if that series takes off like Treme did, well, that's a tremendous amount of work and exposure and money and royalties for the local musicians. So it's something to think about, because it's to me, I was working with Terrence Blanchard recently, and Terrence is known for his jazz, but we also had him do a song by the Beatles, and it was fantastic. So consider that as you're looking at your career.
Well, you made a couple of really good points that I want to kind of follow up on a little bit. On the point of the multiple genres that our artists can really tackle, and maybe this is a Sarah question, I'm not sure, or maybe even a Erica question as far as your approach as a musician. But say I wrote this song and I think it would be appropriate in a movie, but should I do maybe 3 different versions? Do a rock version, do a jazz version, do an instrumental, and that gets me to another thought I'm going to ask too. But should I do 3 or 4 versions and submit that? And would that help you in getting my song placed, but giving you different ways to use it? It might work better in this kind of scene if it's a Cajun song. It might work better in this scene if it's a rock song or an instrumental or whatever. I like that idea. Does that make sense, Sarah? Or?
Yeah, I guess it would just depend on what you were working on. So it could be, but also just the idea, honestly, of doing covers of famous songs in different styles is also really interesting, and are very useful as well. So if you want to say I have, a jazz cover of this Beatles song, that's actually kind of interesting and different, and might be something usable in a surprising way. So yes, you would be much cheaper than the Beatles. You wouldn't get the same fee as the Beatles, but you could get a decent fee. And it would be a lot cheaper for the music supervisor than using the Beatles master. You'd still have to clear the Beatles publishing.
So Dino, in that situation, how would you advise your client on, if they're going to do a cover of a Beatles song, or really try to push to have one of their own compositions used? I guess it's a foot in the door kind of situation, right?
Yeah, maybe this goes back to relationships, but I've definitely had a lot of situations come up with, like for instance, let's say Galactic or Shorty, where I'm communicating with the music supervisor, and, I know that this is not exactly what they want, but those bands might have a studio, and I make it very clear to them, like, look, because maybe the contractual situation of the band, it's like, look, we have the ability to go into our own studio and re-record this song. We might be able to do it. I've had Galactic do something stylistically very different than the original. Maybe the first song had a hip-hop feel, and they like the general gist of the song, but they want a very jazz-sounding thing. But, letting these music supervisors know, like, look, we have some flexibility where it's not just the master recording, that we can re-record it in a very different style, but also kind of going back to one of the initial points of, but we can clear this. Like, it's still the same 5 publishers. We don't need a label waiver. And I can deliver those kind of things that they need in those scenarios. The cover part, I mean, again, you know, I'm always trying to push, like, can we either have a PD tune or a tune that the band wrote? Some clients don't realize, like, hey, look, if you do a Beatles cover, then the Beatles are going to get the publishing side, not you. So, you know, it's, if we can try to move them away, and at least on a PD tune, they would get the arranger credit. So there's ways to kind of, and they know that, look, I mean, the workaround is a lot cheaper if we can get you know, a public domain tune rather than trying to clear a Beatles song, which is not cheap.
And the other point I wanted to bring up that Michael talked about with that new TV show, where they potentially are using LA musicians, do any of you, and I saw you walk in, does any of the tax credits come into play with convincing somebody to use Louisiana music? You know, if it's a movie or whatever. I mean, we have this whole suite of incentives for using music in film, you know, and TV.
If they recorded here, then they could apply for the sound recording credit. And then there's some incentives if you use, you know, local residents, and, you know, there's step-ups in terms of that. You know, I guess the film, if the film is based here, which is probably, you know, if they're filming here, then they could avail themselves of the film credit as well. So yeah, there's definitely some incentives in doing that here, and also not paying LA rates.
That's true. I mean, we've heard so many stories of scores going to Prague because they can get better rates than doing it in the U.S. So, and that was the whole reason of having the incentives here in Louisiana, so that we can maybe get some of that work here. And luckily, we do get a fair amount, but it's always good to get more. So
I know ABC too, all of their shows are AFM, so I think you do need to be an AFM union member to record something for their shows. So, and I'm not a union person. I don't know how one becomes an AFM union member, but
we do have a local.
yeah, so I'm sure somebody else can speak to that. But you do need to be an AFM member to record for them.
How many people are AFM members here? The Federation of Musicians, the American Federation of Musicians. It's our local musicians union. So, I mean,
So I mean, that
That-
could come up, yeah.
yeah,
definitely with
that could be
any
an
of the
issue.
networks, that's an issue. Disney is, you know, non-union, so that's one there.
Yeah.
But even some of the higher end, I mean, if you worked on Walmart commercials, I mean, some of the higher end commercials
Yeah.
will require union membership as well.
Yeah.
And again, back to relationships, like, this is definitely not something that they need to learn, like, on the shoot, when my client's like, oh wait, they want my union papers, what are they talking about?
Exactly.
Like, that's a huge nightmare for her.
I mean, I did a Bally's Casino commercial. Okay, yes, I'm dating myself. Bally's Casino commercial 30 years ago, and I had to join the union because it was going to be a regional commercial shown over like 12 states in the Southeast region, and the only way that I could be on the commercial is if I joined. And the beauty of it is that the union has standard contracts already in place with the networks and things like that, so they can cover you that way. So if you're interested in that, we do have a local. It's over on Ursuline Street. You can go over there and join, talk to those folks. Some of the folks who raise their hands can tell you about union membership. So, you know, it is a right to work state in Louisiana, so you don't have to be, but if you want to get that big network gig, it's worth the investment of whatever it is, $175 a year as a union membership, so that you can take advantage of that. So, you had something, Michael?
I've got a question for Dino and Sarah and yourself. So when you're trying to select songs, does the musician have a chance to see the scene?
No.
Yeah, I was gonna say typically not.
Yeah, I mean,
Sometimes they'll tell us, like, hey, you know, this is Treme, and it's kind of about New Orleans, and
You'll get a scene description.
Yeah, description,
In order to use it, you would always get a scene description, but you wouldn't actually get to see the scene. I mean, the only artists that generally get that are very big artists that require that in order to approve the use. They would need to see, like, script pages or see the scene actually in order to approve it, but a smaller artist wouldn't generally get to
Well,
see
I mean,
the
I asked the question because it's a subject matter that Reed and I were discussing, and is one of the reasons he asked me to come to this thing. But I needed music for a certain scene in my documentary, and my company is very small. It's 2 of us, so it's not a big operation at all. But I listened to, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 records, local musicians, and I couldn't find the kind of music that I wanted for this one scene. So there was a local musician that I gave him a DVD of the scene, and I said, look, this is what I'm looking for, and this is, can you take this, come back in a week, let me know when you're ready, and let's see if you can write something and perform something that works for this visual that I have. And it was amazing. It was just like 7 days later, he asked me over to his house. We played the scene, and he performed it on his piano, and the music worked beautifully. And that's the reason I was asking, because it was really helpful to the musician.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point, because so often the music is almost the afterthought when it comes to these big productions, to the point where they're not really thinking about it. And then it brings up a couple of subjects that I've heard about over the years, like temp track love and things like that we could probably spend days talking about. But the need for the music to be as integral to the whole planning of it, just oftentimes isn't the case. But how do you convince a producer or a director that it should be more important, that they would maybe do like Michael's talking about? And of course, he's talking about a documentary that he has full control over. Oftentimes, a bigger production might be several people with their hands in the pie as far as controlling it. But what advice would you have, or how would that be facilitated at all?
I mean, generally, if we're getting brought onto a project, music is important to whoever we're working with, because you don't have to have a music supervisor. So if you've brought one on, then music is already important to you. What we spend our time convincing producers of is to give us more money to execute the creative vision, because music is most certainly financially the absolute last afterthought. And it's also one of the last things that is done on a project. So it's budgeted prior, and then it's finished after. And generally, you're stuck holding the bag of, we didn't budget this correctly, and the creative wants all of these huge songs, and it's just not doable, and you're just trying to scramble to find more money. So that's generally what we spend our time, and it works part of the time. Some of the time we just have to replace everything.
Well, you brought up an interesting subject, and before, I know we're going to have a lot of Q&As, but before we get there, this question never seems to come up in these panels, but let's talk about money. I mean, how much, can you give us some ballparks? Give us some ballparks so people have an idea. If it's a 15-second use in the background of something versus the title song versus whatever, give us some ideas about, and all of you can contribute. What do you expect? What do you think's reasonable? How do people approach that? Like, I know the question I get from artists all the time is, I got asked to be in this movie, but I don't know how much to ask for, and I don't want to undersell myself, but I don't want to price myself out of the gig. So give us some guidelines on how do we approach that from each of your perspectives.
Well, you'll hear 9 different answers on this, right?
I would say the best thing to do if you're in that situation, because there is such a wide range of fees that it could be from $0 to hundreds of thousands of dollars. I would say the best thing to do is to ask what the project's budget is and what the music budget is, and then try to budget yourself accordingly. A lot of times that's what you'll find, that licensors, publishers, and masterholds, that's the first question to ask. What's the film's budget, and what is the music budget, and then how many songs are included? So they are trying to calculate based on what you have, what they would like to receive. So I think that's a good starting point. But it's such a wide range. It's really tough to say.
Yeah.
For me, the things that I've participated in, the budgets were already set, and basically they just told me what it would pay. So it's a little different for me on the artist side of it. It just kind of had to deal with what's in the box already.
So if you want some numbers, I'll give you some numbers. Okay, for documentary, for the film festival circuit, we'll give you $500 to $1,000. He doesn't like that answer. For the use in the documentary, maybe $2,500 to $5,000, depending on the copyright per side. For a commercial, maybe anywhere between, could be $5,000 to $10,000 to, depending on who it is, could be $100,000. Feature film, well, maybe not feature film. Let's go to like the world of True Detectives. Just did a license yesterday. That's $10,000. So maybe those float somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000, maybe somewhere in there. Feature films, everybody thinks that's always the big money, but the rates seem to be going the other way, I think, now. But still, that is, I do expect, good money on those kind of things, which I guess means somewhere between $10,000 and $50,000. That's my shot.
Well, it's everything's driven by money, unfortunately, time and money. And I bring up the time aspect of it too, because another pretty important aspect, if you're licensing music to a project, whatever, I know from the studio's perspective and from the the people who are doing the funding, they want as long as a term as possible. And and as an independent producer, I sit back and I go, wait a minute, you want me to pay for the publishing rights for worldwide, in perpetuity, TV, film, DVD, you name it. Well, that's a whole different budget. And normally they will try to squeeze you as much as possible and try to say, well, this is what we need, this is what we need. And it's important to me to hold the line on that, not only for my own financial protection, but it's also for the musicians. It's if a musician's going to say, I'm going to give you worldwide rights in perpetuity, well, then that's a buyout. That has to be a different level of pay for you, a different fee. Generally speaking, 15 years worldwide rights is what I sort of deal with all the time. And normally those fees range anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per song for my line of work, not a big feature film. In the current case that the current project, I had budgeted for 30 songs. So 30 songs is what Celeste and I thought we would need for this film. And it was almost all New Orleans music. And we had a screening where I wanted to get the input from Terrence and a bunch of consultants and people working on the film with us. And the purpose of the screening was, okay, let's decide what songs I can cut, because I think the rough cut had at that point 40 to 45 songs, and I just didn't have the budget. Well, everybody said, well, you can't cut anything, you need to add songs. This is New Orleans, you got to cover more. And I'm going, whoa, guys, we came together and everybody just said, well, you got to find a way. And we wound up with, I think, 55 or 60 songs. But that is a case where I had one set budget that was approved, and then I had to go back to the publishers to plead my case. And it worked out. And Dino, I forgot how many songs you probably had, but Dino was pretty good about it. He takes my phone call, and I owe him a couple of drinks or a dinner when it's over. But
That's what I was going to say, a big steak dinner's coming.
But anyway, the term is very important.
So I know we probably have some questions. We have a microphone floating around, so because we are streaming on Facebook at OZ and the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, please use the microphone.
How you doing today? I have a really quick question about uploading the projects to be listened to for usage in film. You were explaining a little bit earlier that you don't want attachments in email, you want metadata. Do you prefer third-party sites like Mediafire and WeTransfer? I'm just curious about just,
Yeah.
how to upload, what you're looking for.
Those work, really anything that's just kind of, an easy click of a link, begin download, where you don't have to click through multiple things to get where you need to go. But any of those sites are fine. WeTransfer, Box, Dropbox. I don't love Dropbox, but that's just personal opinion.
I was going to say, like, Dropbox a little bit. All right.
But yeah, any of those sites are used often.
How y'all doing? My name's Blake Owens. So I'm one of the artists selected in the Film Fest thing coming up. So they're supposed to send us some prompts about preparing for our pitch session. We haven't received them yet, but it's about 10 days away. So I'm wondering, how do I approach this without knowing what it could be used for? Any tips on things I should stay away from, or because I can go in a lot of different directions musically, and I don't want to pick the wrong thing, without any direction.
Bill, do you have an answer for that? Aren't they going to get a treatment of some sort prior?
Yeah, about 2 weeks out, you'll be getting a music brief that's going to describe what they're looking for. So all of them are working on projects now. Needs to sound like Jay-Z, could be beats per second, what key it's in, all the different things that they're doing. The film festival starts October, I think, 20th. So right around the first week in October, you should be getting that stuff.
No, I think on the 28th, because I'm supposed to be a part of that too, so I got to figure that out. But the 28th, I think, is when we're just going to talk through all those kind of issues and go over the briefs, and then that'll prepare you for the event that is actually going to be October 19, 2021.
My colleague is coming down for that, and I can tell you we're looking for trap music for a stripper show set in Mississippi, so you can prepare that.
There you go. You get a little sneak preview. I want to hear that song too when you're done. Next question.
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about seeking out music supervisors for films. So who and where do you seek out people for advertising? Like if you're interested in having your music placed in advertisement, where do you go?
Very good question. The agencies, there are a ton of agencies. Most of them are based in New York and LA. Not all of them have music departments, but a lot of them do, and that's a research situation. But also there are companies that sort of act as music departments for agencies and just do music for commercials. That's also kind of a research situation, but there's also a ton of those that agencies that don't have music departments hire just for music supervision services. That's one of the things that we do for agencies. So it's agencies and music supervision companies for advertising.
And there are some local advertising agencies that actually use local music a lot. I mean, you hear them in commercials, you might not realize, but those are done here as well. So it's just a matter of doing your research, but there are several here in town. Before we jump to the next question, I want to jump in real quick though, because you hit on an interesting point. I have a songwriter friend in LA who actually is from here. He was my first intern at Loyola. And he had written a bunch of songs for like the OC and Grey's Anatomy and all that stuff, and then he started working his way into some film stuff. But now he's like, I don't want to write for film anymore. He now writes for the trailers. And he's like, I make 5 times as much money on the trailers as I do on the damn movie, because what he told me was, on a trailer, they're showing it in every theater in the country. They're showing it on TV. They're showing it online. It's making way more impressions. Whereas in the movie, he's got 15 seconds in one time while people sit in the theater. So that's something to think about from the advertising perspective too, is that's a whole nother area. Now, do music supervisors get involved in the trailers as well?
There are music supervisors who just do trailers, and there are trailer houses that just do trailers. I've never worked in that field. It's completely separate from what we do, but yes, that's a whole other field of music supervision.
So when you're doing your research, look into that, because there's more money in the trailers than there is in the...
Yeah, the fees are like advertising. It's bigger fees. Yeah.
Question over here?
Yeah.
Juan Tigre.
Hey, thanks for being here, you guys. I have a quick question regarding another question that was posed earlier, which is I've had an experience where I represent a large catalog of music, and a music supervisor will ask me to send over the whole catalog. And I'm wondering, how would you prefer to receive something like that, or how would you like it to be detailed out? Different genres, different things. How can we go about that if we've got a lot of different music going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to download a whole catalog. I wouldn't necessarily want that unless I specifically asked for it, but if I did, it's kind of the same thing, just organized in folders. Like I said, we use Disco, and Disco makes it really easy to just, and I know a lot of music supervision companies are using this, where you don't even have to download, you just save it to your Disco, and it just moves over, so that makes it very easy if you want to look into getting one of those. I didn't get paid for that plug. I just really like Discos. And I know a lot of music supervisors are using it, and it's just so easy to just say save to Disco. But it organizes it very easily for you as well, for anybody who doesn't use it. But yeah, I guess type, it's tough to say. But yes, style, you could put it by genre. I generally would like it by artist. But it's, yeah. Sorry if that didn't answer your question.
So are there other discos? Are there other kind of systems like that? And is this something that an artist or a label like John's label can actually get an account with, and then they just share that account with you? Is that how it works?
Yeah, and you can just directly message music basically without ever having to download it. Box is another one. Dropbox is another one.
So Disco is just like another Dropbox kind of thing.
It sort of is, except it's more conducive to playing music specifically and creating playlists and whatnot.
Good to know. More research for y'all. We have time for 2 more questions, I believe. Larry?
Hey, the question is, Sarah, let's say you liked a song that I had written, and you asked me to use your song. And I come back at you and I say, would you speak to my attorney, Dino? Would you shy away from me at that point?
No.
Or is that a better position for me to be in?
It probably is, because you'll probably get someone to negotiate more money for you, but for us it's no difference. As long as the rights are sorted, I'll talk to a manager, publisher, label, lawyer, all good.
And Dina, what is the best way to protect your work?
From what? What do you mean?
As a composer?
Well, I would obviously register the copyright. And then also I'd obviously register it with BMI or ASCAP or whoever your performance rights organization is. And again, going back to like housekeeping and having all your stuff in order, again, if there is like some back end, let's say on the deal, that pays through a performance rights organization, you don't want to hit her with, oh, I'll get back to you on my publisher company name because it hadn't been approved by BMI, and those kind of headaches. I mean, she's got like 2 days to place this music in the picture, so, again, having your ducks in a row, I think that's important.
So even though I'm on the panel, I have a question. So my introduction to sync licensing was through performing on a song, vocals, and it was picked up by Apple. But due diligence wasn't done with the artist's manager, because I've learned that if it's 1 singer, 2 singers, 3 singers, that money is allocated that way. So what do you do if they didn't reach you and the monies went to elsewhere and not you, and you were on the track?
I mean, It sounds like you would need to get a lawyer to
Hire
pursue
Dino.
it.
Hey, Dino. No.
Yeah, you need to call Dino. Was it a SAG contract or was it a SAG?
It was through SAG, yes.
Yeah, that's really surprising that they would, if it was through SAG generally, I mean,
Well,
you could
the
call-
management company,
Yeah.
I'm a SAG member,
Right,
but
right, yeah.
the management company evidently
Oh, they-
overlooked it. They didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Right,
And
yeah.
it only went to, all the monies went to one person for a while.
That's rough.
Now, we did have to go back and kind of fight.
Yeah.
To get it,
mean,
but I still
SAG
didn't get
may
what
also
was-
help you with that
Okay.
because that's their responsibility to make sure the monies are distributed properly amongst the singers and that their union members are paid properly. But I think it would be involvement of a lawyer and SAG, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, normally I would have said it'd be tough.
Yeah.
Because usually it would be like, hey, it was some film that he had the licensing fee and I didn't get my allocated portion, and then those people are totally gone now. That's difficult. But I think here, because it is SAG, then I would contact them and say, hey, you guys kind of screwed up, and there's definitely a black box of money out there for SAG, and maybe they can reallocate, you know. And if they're still paying, they could, of course, withhold from the overpaid person and pay you.
I know the SAG guy too. I could put you in touch with him.
Yeah.
Yep. Back here.
Hi, my name is Christy, and I am with the band Buzz. And I was asking Sarah, if you don't mind, would we send a link to an EPK in hopes that maybe you would like our look and we could be included actually on the show, not just having the music represented?
Yeah, I mean, those instances I'd say are few of on-camera stuff are fewer and far between than just a normal sync. But if you want to send music and also include images in case, sure. But more often, because I mean, Kyle really, if Kyle were here, that would be for him. That's because he casts on-camera singers for NCIS. That's his main gig. So for him, I'm sure it would be super important, but for us, it's not the majority of the time is an on-camera. It's a less likely scenario, but it can't hurt.
All right, my question is in reference to publishing. I think y'all mentioned licensing with a worldwide in perpetuity, like a buyout. If it's a buyout, or you still do publishing down the line on the music? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would depend on what the deal says. I mean, some of them might have a reuse payment. Some of them might have a performance royalty payment, like through ASCAP or BMI. But I would say generally, if the licensing fee is kind of a flat fee in perpetuity, that's going to be all the licensing income you're going to see. You know, there could be, like I say, maybe depending on the use, there could be a public performance royalty that's due you. And that could go on as long as the piece is being shown.
So it's saying buyout doesn't exactly cut you off from what you do from performances down the line.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the performance royalty side, so that's like BMI and ASCAP money.
Right.
So, you know, if it would be something like, you know, I don't know what, you know, if it was on True Detective or something, and the agreement says, hey, we're going to pay performance royalties on this, then that money's still due. Yeah.
Got it. So that's just pertaining to the licensing fee. There won't be no renewal.
But be careful, because I know, and I remember Basin Street reached out with me with a question about this recently. They had gotten a long form there was like a place for them to sign to say like this was a buyout of their performance right royalties as well. And I think that's a new thing that you find a lot of streaming companies trying to do so they can get out of that. And you need to be aware when you get a long form agreement to have your lawyer look at it, or just never sign away those rights, because that is the only money that you'll continue to get after a buyout.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
You know, there's something to add there. Your question got me thinking about something, which is, from my standpoint, from being a filmmaker, back when I first started, I had to really think about the fact that I wasn't known, and it was difficult to get folks to say, okay, I'm going to trust this guy, whatever the case is. So I would think as a musician, I mean, and so I would have to probably do some contracts where I felt it wasn't entirely fair, it was sort of lopsided to the funder, but at the same time, I knew that the programs, if I did my job, they would get exposure, and that helps build a career. So I would think from the music side, it's probably very similar. I would think if there's, I don't know, if there's House of the Rising Sun and you get a song on there and you can't get the deal that you want, the entire deal, but you get something that's doable, workable, you paid for your services, and then you get your name and your music with that. I imagine that that's something that should be considered. And maybe these three can answer that question a little bit more, but I'm coming from the film side, but I would think it would still apply.
I mean, if any of y'all want to take a stab at it, I know we got to wrap up because we still have to talk to Mr. Boutte. Yeah. But obviously, this is a topic that we can continue talking about for a long time. So what I would suggest is do your research. There's plenty of information online. There's tons of videos. This is a topic that boggles the mind for a lot of musicians, seasoned pros as well as newbies. So take your time and do your research. But let's take a minute and thank our wonderful panelists, Michael Murphy, Dino Gankendorf, Erica Falls, and Sarah Bromberg.
Down in the Tremendous. I got to tell you, I wrote that tune right around the corner on, what's up, James? I wrote that tune right between Ursuline and St. Philip on Treme, no, it's St. Claude Street at the time. So that was my good luck to write that tune because nobody had invoked Treme ever, never, ever. They always talked about the French quarters, the river boats, blah, blah, blah. And I just talked about my home in a neighborhood that my ancestors helped build. And it turned out to be a good day when I wrote that tune.
It did.
1993.
That's what I was going to ask.
And I want to thank the panel, Stephanie, Mike, Dino, and Erica. Everything they said was true. I know I sound like an infomercial, right? Everything they said was true. But everything they really said was true, you know, as far as like trying to get your music out there, you have to have your ducks in order. One of the reasons that I know HBO dealt with me immediately was because when Blake Lay called me up, and I thought he was lying, I thought it was one of my friends, like, you know, we want to use your tone. I'm like, whatever, man, click. So I hung up on him like twice, he can tell you that. And then finally he said, look, call this number, you're gonna find out it's the Treme people, man, don't hang up on it. So I did, and the conversation went something like this. They wanted the song for the theme, and he asked me, once we worked it out, once I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that, he asked me these two questions. He says, do you have a lawyer? And let your lawyer call us. And I didn't have a lawyer. And I didn't have a manager. And I didn't have a booking agent. I didn't have anybody. But one thing I did have was all my copyrights and my paperwork in order. I own those tunes. I wrote them. I own the publishing, I own the mechanical rights. So, especially that one in particular. So my question was to Blake when he asked me, do I have a lawyer? I asked him straight up, are you gonna cheat me? Because it would be bad form if you're gonna cheat me when you're doing a series on New Orleans musicians. He says, oh, no. I said, well, cool. I'm college educated, I read with comprehension, send me the contract. And that's how we worked that out. And subsequently, from that relationship that I had with him, once he realized all my music was actually owned by me, mechanically, the publisher, and I had all the paperwork in order, it was easy to deal with. So he needed other tunes, he would call me, and not only for the theme song, but I think maybe 4 other tunes they put in the series. And then later on, before he left town, I said, man, let's do a record together. Because it's not bad to have a music supervisor producing your record. If you got tunes on there, they might be able to use. And sure enough, I used almost everybody I knew in the city, man. Everybody. I used a lot of musicians on that. People say, you could never make that money back. I said, I don't care, you know, because if you're worried about money with music, get out. Get out. You know, worry about the music. And where was I there? Sorry, guys, I got a little brain fart.
You answered all my questions already.
Oh, yeah, but the point is that if you, I was going to say that when I did that, my last record, not my most recent, so I had all these great guys on there. I spent a lot of money on that record. And guess what? As soon as it was done, a month later, Universal came up and he spent almost $50,000 in my pocket for one song, right? So the record was paid for and I was in the black, man, and I was like, you know, I didn't do another record for 7 years. That's pretty stupid, right? My point is also, I'm a member of ASCAP, and those quarterly checks, you know, when they pop up, you know, sometimes, especially when HBO was, when I was running, you know, every week, man, you know, those checks were really beautiful. But they're still good, you know, it still come in, you know, so you got to get registered with either BMI, ASCAP, or that CSAC, whatever. So you just have to get that in line. And somebody said about the documentaries, Trimmy, I can remember Eli, who lives, what's Eli's last name? Doesn't make a difference. Anyway, he did a documentary on the Trimmy Faubourg. Anybody saw that documentary? Well, somebody must have, right? So one of my friends told me, says, oh, man, he says, you must have made a lot of money with that. I said, nah. I said, but if you gotta know, I let him use it for $300. He said, you're a fool. I said, yeah. But that's my record, my song. I still own it. So if I gave it to him for a penny, it's on me, it's mine. I didn't have to ask anybody. And I have a funny feeling that somebody must have heard that in the documentary as the closing song on the documentary. That's what I'm thinking, I don't know. You know, might just be lucky. Not that lucky though. So what I would say to you is if you have your music, jealously keep your rights to your music. Try not to work for hire and don't give your stuff up for nothing, right? And it all starts with a good song. You know, you gotta write a good song. And after you got the good song, you have to have it recorded in high fidelity. Because if it's not in high fidelity, they're not gonna be able to sync it up to to the television. It's gonna so you have to find a good studio, a good song. You have to get your paperwork together. If you're collaborating with people, be fair, you know, and just do the right thing from that standpoint, man. And that's all I can say. I don't know, you know, I'm just lucky. I'm lucky, man, because I've been a working musician not all my life, but for the last 30 years, and I'm 60 years old now, 61, in about 2 months. So, but one of the things the advice I got from Stevie Wonder when I quit my banking job as a VP of a bank, and everybody thought he has lost his mind. But I had found my mind. I wanted to do something that I believed in, that I knew in my heart I could do, and that was music. And I asked him, I said, dude, take me with you, take me with you, take me with you. And he says, can't do that. I asked him 3 times, right? And I said, well, what do I have to do? And he said, patience and determination. And I looked right at him and said, dude, take me with you. But he was right. He was right, man. You know what I mean? I just got off of a plane from Penticton, Canada. Anybody know where that is? Well, you shouldn't. All right? It's a big funeral home, a place where they bury people, I think, in the Yucatan up there in Canada. And their theme is come to Penticton and never leave. But I was flying like in February on these like military planes, man, coming back, and I was like, oh God, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? Jeez. That banking job was looking good again, right? I said, no, that's not gonna happen. So I'm sitting at home, washing dishes. I've never had a dishwasher in my life. So I'm washing dishes by hand, right? And it's meditative for me because I know I'm getting something accomplished and it's very mundane. So I get a lot of good ideas, songs, whatever, when I'm washing those dishes. And good things always seem to happen to me. And that's when Blake called up, when I was washing those dishes saying, something's gotta change in my life. This is just crazy, you know? I'm so tired of like, you know, being on the road all the time, missing my friends, family, blah, blah, blah. And that's how I got the trimming, man. But I was ready. And that's the deal, you gotta be ready. And Sarah's not lying. When they say, hey, they call you up and say, I gotta have the song. And if you don't have it together, man, they might love your song, but they can't put it in there. They can't put it in. So if you make it easy for them, you know, it's gonna be easier on you. And also, I wanna encourage, if you do any kind of records, it's SC. You gotta make sure that you register your stuff and have that number. Because if you don't, you ain't gonna collect a dime. They'll be playing your music all over the world, but if it's not registered, you know, it doesn't, that barcode doesn't come up, you're not gonna get paid. So there's certain things that, you know, that's why working in a quality studio counts, and following up and doing all the right things, licensing, and making sure all your ducks are in order, you know, and just keep writing good songs, man, and don't give up. And I know Blake. Blake is really one of the only music supervisors I know personally, but I don't see him every day, you know, and it's hard for me to get up to New York, so I'm glad we're doing this kind of stuff, man, where they're gonna bring in people for the film festival and guys will be able to present their music, because it's ridiculous, really. I mean, Nashville's got gets all the work, New York, LA, and it should be right here at home. We should keep this right here at home, man, you know? So if you got any questions, I guess I'll tell the truth. Since you're not the media. Any questions?
I told Bill before we started, I said, all I got to do is hit the go button with John, and he'll take it from there. That's why I love this dude.
Yeah, I got a question. I'm trying to see, how do you sign up for the film festival?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure how you sign up for it. Blake has got, these guys will let you know for sure, man. You do it. Okay.
Yeah,
you should do it.
they can probably answer your question out at the front desk out there.
I can tell you, the film festival, I was on the very first one. Mm-hmm. Years ago, I did the soundtrack for Maggie Mee. And you remember Maggie Mee? Me and Ben was on that. Me and Ben did that soundtrack. And I did Wake Up Maggie, I think I got something to say to you. Somebody said that sound like Mick Jagger. No, Rod Stewart. I actually did on that record, man. I honestly did. I was like, God, and I'd never listened to him before, right? So I was thinking he sounded like me. Okay. I ain't know nothing about Mick Jagger. I mean, Rod Stewart.
And one more question.
We did that. It was a story about, it was a hooker, a transgender. A drag queen on Bourbon Street who was raising him. And it was a great movie, man. And by the way, it was a good movie, man. Should have got an Oscar.
And one more question. As me being a young artist trying to come up into the music industry, who would be a good mentor for me to get all my docs into the right perspective for people to look at them? And who do you think I can be underneath as, you know,
as a mentor,
a music label?
Wow, man. You know what? I'll be honest with you because I don't have. I've never signed to a label. I was approached by several when I was young and beautiful.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Now I'm old and sexy. They don't want me.
Well, you know, you're doing the right thing by being here, man, and meeting people.
That's what it is,
Okay.
man. You got to network
Okay.
and meet folks who are doing it and latch on to some honest people who are actually in the industry, man.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people coming in right now, you know. So
Okay.
that's what you got to do. And also I got to tell you, work, man. Like
Yeah.
Stevie told me, patience. I was working, man. I was working every week at DBA for nobody, right? But I didn't know that Eric Obermeyer was in the audience every night when I was going off ranting, wanting to kill everybody because my city was ruined, right?
And who's Eric? Tell us who he is.
Obermeyer, he was one of the major writers in Treme. So I didn't know all these guys, they had their eyes on me. I was just doing my thing. And that's what I would encourage you to do is just continue to do whatever you're doing musically. And, you know, sooner or later, man, something's got it. Like I was washing them dishes and saying, God damn, something's got to break sooner or later, you know? That phone rang, man. And you know what happened after that? I was touched by TV. I was touched by TV, right? Because I'd worked my ass off for a long time. Nobody could, I mean, I had people who loved what I was doing, et cetera, et cetera. But then all of a sudden, man, I got stalkers and everything, bona fide.
We have a question back here.
I really don't even have a question. So I'm your cousin.
No way, you a Bouteng? No, you Owens.
Both.
Shut
My
up,
mom was Gwen
What?
Bouteng.
Oh my
There's a lot of cousins in that family. I'm friends with a lot of them.
We gonna talk after.
Oh my gosh, man.
We have a question over here. John, we got a question for you.
Darren, I'm not family, but I do have a question for you.
Look, you could easily be, darling.
Okay. I'd love to be.
Very easily. Check your DNA.
Okay, I will.
There's no lie. Anybody in this room could be my family, and and actually,
You probably are.
We're all 54 cousins, one way or another. But this is Louisiana, so you don't have to believe in science, I guess. But anyway, what you saying?
Okay, something that you said resonated with me about keeping the business in New Orleans, and that's something I'm really passionate about bringing, or just having local people build up agencies here, publishing companies here, and bringing more of the business to New Orleans. That way New Orleans musicians don't have to outsource to other cities. So what do you think it's gonna take for musicians in the city, like larger musicians in the city, to not outsource, to find someone local in New Orleans and Louisiana to represent them?
What they're doing right here, right now, yeah, I mean, I never saw anything like this before. I've been here forever. And nobody's ever talked about trying to get musicians hand in hand with music supervisors and getting our music placed, you know? You see everybody playing New Orleans on TV, but it's never any New Orleans musicians. That's what Treme did. Treme, if they had any sense, all they would have to do is go look at Treme and say, okay, we got music all in here we can pull out. Or musicians, if they look at those catalogs, they could feel serve as Hollywood for the next 30 years. But I think this is a good thing that what we're doing here, man, you know, is I guess the industry is we're getting a little hipper.
Yeah, there's a number of efforts that are underway, and like New Orleans Business Alliance, Greater New Orleans Inc., you know, there's a number of folks that are really trying to help grow the industry here and keep it local, and there's some big initiatives that are on the way, and it kind of gives me an opportunity to plug the flyers that are on the seats. For this project that we have going on called NOME. It's the New Orleans Music Economy Initiative. And we're asking everyone to fill out the survey because we're actually doing some behind the scenes work right now on quantifying our music industry, doing a true economic impact study, and then leveraging that information to help go out and grow the businesses and help support startups like yourself who might want to become a local music publisher and start publishing some of the music of these folks. So keep your eyes peeled for New Orleans Music Economy Initiative and Greater New Orleans Inc. and New Orleans Business Alliance are both involved with that. I think we have time for maybe one more question back here in the corner. and then we'll let John
Hi,
go
how you
cook some
doing?
gumbo.
My question is, so far throughout the night, we've talked about a lot of things that artists could and should be doing. What would be, like, just over the course of one's career, or whether it's interfacing with people in the music industry or in the film industry or anything like that, what would be like some don'ts, like things to avoid or be wary of as you kind of navigate these things?
I'll start. These are some of my mantras. Under promise and over deliver. So think about that. Is that right? Under promise and over deliver. Yes, that's a key, because you want to build the trust with somebody, right? That's what we talked about earlier on the panel. This industry is built on relationships. John talked about his relationship with Blake. That relationship is still paying off to this day from a phone call that he got. I can honestly say the relationships I've built over the years have led to the jobs that I've had. This really is a relationship industry. Coming to an event like this, meeting people, those are the do's. The don'ts are, don't promise something that you can't deliver on. Don't be braggadocious. This industry, there's enough egos in this industry. We want to work with people that are friendly and kind and who follow up when you ask them on something. And I'll apologize because I know there's a couple people in this room that I owe emails to, so you're getting them soon. But those, it's really about building relationships. It's a people industry. It really is a people business, and it's a very small community. Even though it's global, the music industry is very small. Everybody knows everybody. And when you're not nice to somebody, everybody knows it. And when you're a sweetheart like John Boutte, everybody wants to be your friend.
But I can also tell you this, man. Ask for what you are worth.
Yeah.
All right? Don't never ask for anything less than you're worth, right? And, because people say, oh, well, that's too much. Don't ask for too much. Ask for too much, they'll give you a little, right? Just don't never undersell yourself, man, or your music, because it's not fair for you. It's not fair to the other people, because I know folks are, oh, he sold it for that, you know what I'm saying? And they'll come back and nickel and dime you. So I'm not saying don't price yourself out, but ask for what you're worth, man. You guys, I know I put a lot of time, in my music. If I think of the hours that I put in, it's easily over 10,000 hours of music.
Yeah, it's an industry that you gotta do it. It's not like I want to play music, I want to write songs. If you're going to be serious about it, it's got to be something that comes from your heart, from inside, and it's a fire that burns. And those are the people who are going to be passionate. John wasn't on fire to be a banker. He was on fire to be who he is today. And if that's what's burning inside of you, just develop your craft, get good at it, meet the right people, and be patient, as he said. Work hard and be patient.
That's the hardest thing, man. I thought he was bullshit when he said be patient. I'm like, really? But, if you come to that crossroad and you don't know whether to turn left or right, just wait there. Sooner or later, something's going to come, and you'll be able to decide whether it's good or bad. But I want to say also with Erica, tell them people call me from CSI. NCIS, would you do that? And by the way, they pay, and their royalties are good. And I was lucky enough, I didn't have my full band. I just used my bass player and myself, and I sang at the foot of Canal Street in a little silly scene, something Catch the Dragon or whatever. I'm still receiving checks off of that thing, man, and decent amount of money, I got to split it with Paul Sanchez, but still good.
Well, I want to give a shout out to the Jazz and Heritage Foundation and Sync Up for hosting this again, to the New Orleans Business Alliance for putting this together. A shout out to our panel earlier. We had Sarah, we had Erica, we had Michael, we had Dino, and then to John Boutte. Thank you, and keep your eye open for the next thing. And here's Bill to close it out.
Okay, just about 30 seconds. How about Reed? What a job. Thank you. He put together the whole panel, the whole group. There's a woman running around here crazy, Valerie Huntley, who puts this whole thing on for us. and she is the workhorse of NOLA BA, and Dana Allison, who had to scoot out. But the best thing is here, if you're still here, if you need your music copyrighted, if you need to register your copyright, we will pay for it. You'll make an appointment with the Ella Foundation, or the Ella Project. It is in your packet. You'll go down there. They're not just going to give you something to fill out. They're going to sit down with you and fill out the copyright registration for your entire catalog. They're going to pay for that registration, and we're going to actually pay them back for it. So get it done. Here's the last thing. If you don't get into the New Orleans Film Festival thing this year, I can tell you we're putting in our budget for next year too. Start working on it now. I mean, start thinking about, learn the things about music supervision. I don't know a whole lot, but I go to some conferences. Like one person said, don't fade out a song. I need a song that ends. I can fade it out. But if I've got a hard ending to a scene, I need a hard ending to a song. You're going to put birds in your song? Great. I got to have a scene with birds in it. Things that you got to think of that are on the other side of the production. You have people that, you're talking about Treme. Man, what a perfect match. He put the whole soul of Treme in there. So those are the things to think about when you're working with, and this was the funniest thing I'd heard. There's a lot of dialogue that has really crappy sound, and they have to have music that takes care of all the background crap that they don't want you to hear. And you can pound that stuff out, in a second. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity. We're going to continue this stuff. Go to the Ella Project, get yourself registered and get that started. And please, get rich.